Welcome, everyone. It's great to see everyone here for ICA's season's second series of exhibitions. Michelle Lopez's Ballast Barricades continues on the second floor, but we're also welcoming two new artists, Trevor Shimizu in the project space and Karyn Olivier on the first floor galleries with everything that's alive moves. My name is John McInerney. I am the Daniel W. Dietrich II Interim Director, and I am honored to kick off tonight's celebrations with you. I want to just make some brief acknowledgments and a couple remarks, and then I'll move forward. But first, I'd like to sincerely thank the ICA Board of Overseers for their ongoing support and leadership for ICA. I'd also like to thank the Provost's Office for their ongoing support of not just ICA, but all the amazing arts at Penn and the university overall for it's just great assets and it's great support for evenings like tonight. I also want to thank the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts, Dolfinger McMahon Foundation, the Daniel W. Dietrich II Foundation, the Edna Wright Andrade Fund of the Philadelphia Foundation, the Henry Moore Foundation, Christian R. and Mary F. Lindbach Foundation, the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage, 47 Canal, New York, the ICA crew, Ken Ard, yeah, give it up, Itziar Barrio, Jacob Chris Hamas, and Trapita Mason, and all our other donors, members, and supporters. Thank you very much for supporting ICA. Our curators, Alex Kline and Anthony Elms, will be up shortly, along with Karyn and Trevor. I just want to make a few brief remarks about ICA. At ICA, we believe in the power of art to inform and inspire. We are artistic-centric, and that is at the heart of what ICA does. I think the experience of working on Karyn's show really exemplifies that to me so much. The ICA staff's been working with Karyn over many months, but particularly intensive over the last few weeks. It's really, I think, important and incredibly meaningful for everyone here at ICA to have the opportunity to work with these artists and to work with them to realize their vision and to work together with them. I think listening to them, helping them do that, we learned so much from the artists. It's really humbling, and I really think it's what makes us so energized and makes this such a special place, because it really is about the art and the artists, and so we're incredibly thankful to have those opportunities. And now our focus can shift to our visitors. We have this wonderful celebration tonight. I'm really looking forward to the dialogue with the art and with the artist. We also have an incredible season of programming that I think the curators are going to touch on in a few minutes. And we also have just an incredible staff here at ICA. I want to give a special thanks to the entire staff. We all have these little name tags. Please reach out to us, talk to us. I think we want to share the energy and the excitement of the shows, and we'd love to answer any questions you have. You can speak to any of us. I also encourage you to speak to the guards. They're incredibly knowledgeable about the work. Linda, Rhonda, and all of them. They were here this morning for the docent tours, and they're also great guides to the experiences here at ICA. I really believe the arts is what makes us human, inspires us and challenges us, and allows us to really process this really complex and fragile world. So I'm very honored to be a part of everything tonight, and without further ado, I want to go ahead and welcome up Alex Kline, our Dorothy and Steve Weber curator.
And I'm pleased to introduce Michelle Lopez, a fabulous artist who I've had the privilege of working with this past year to develop this incredible installation upstairs. Some of you might have already seen us in conversation. The show opened in early September, but we are really excited that it gets to be on view through May because there's so many things that have been unfolding out of it. For those of you who don't know Michelle is based here in Philadelphia, but only relatively recently. She's an artist that I've been following on and off for about 20 years, and just completely impressed with her dexterity with materials and her engagement with a kind of feminist critique of histories of sculpture. So when Michelle landed here and began kind of teaching at Penn and joining our community here, I immediately kind of pounced on her and said, hey, what would you want to do if you could work in an institutional context in the large space of our second floor galleries? And so her show upstairs is an answer to that prompt. For those of you that aren't familiar with her work, just a little kind of brief overview of a few of the kind of material engagements and conceptual concerns in her practice. Because upstairs you're going to find a rather large, encompassing site-specific installation, but there's also some moments from throughout about 10 years of work that we wanted to call attention to kind of ground the kind of jumping off point. So when I mentioned this idea of a kind of feminist critique of histories of sculpture and minimalism, in the middle we have one of the works that's actually in the show upstairs, Blue Angels, Paper Angels, that has a kind of striking resemblance to something like the work of John McCracken on the left, and then just to show how she's also taken it to architectural scale on the right to the size of a building. But one of the things that is really interesting to note is that this is a heavy material, heavy metal, aluminum that Michelle's actually wrestling with, and you're kind of grappling it with your body. Do you want to talk a little bit about what prompted you to make this work? Because what's also interesting is this connection, not just with kind of histories of sculpture, but structural systems and a bigger kind of critique of a kind of political infrastructure.
Yeah, I wanted to, it's a conflation of a few ideas, and one is I did want to tamper a little bit with this idea of minimalists, like a masculinist minimalism, and also just kind of like quite literally break it. This large one that's at the Bass Museum, it came from wanting to create these large airplane wings that were kind of crumpled and wilted and broken. And do it within the same kind of framework in minimalism, but just instead of it being so kind of like this Finnish fetish perfection, have it really just be broken, and to think about them more in terms of drawing. Like I think of it as this performance in relationship to my body, and so I would kind of wrestle with them on the floor and then put them back up and see them as a process of drawing in space with my body with these aluminum pieces.
Right. And also thinking about the kind of carnage from 9/11 of the kind of fuselage kind of falling from the airplanes.
Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to single that work out because of the bodily engagement with material. So everything that you see in Michelle's show has been wrestled with in a similar manner. You're going to see things that look like found or fabricated objects, like chain link fence that's actually been made by hand. And just so we can spend a minute with the installation itself, I want to just bring up a few previous works where she's dealing with these questions of balance and counterbalance with regard to sculpture, but then also with the idea of kind of political systems and how delicate they are. I don't think it's a coincidence that we're talking so much about infrastructure these days with everything that's going on in our society. And some of the things that were we discussed as you were kind of going into the process. The city here is a rapidly gentrifying place. Buildings are going up, coming down. So you were really struck by that kind of crumbling city, and also the potential for those things to be remobilized. So I also look to something like the protests in Hong Kong, where you see the barricades that are meant to be keeping people out, but are also used by the protesters back against the police forces, or things that look quite delicate, like bamboo scaffolding, that are actually quite strong. Do you want to say a few words just about the installation as we wrap up here? Because it's really something that is not well represented in photos. You have to see it in person.
Yes, so I was really interested after doing the Blue Angels of ways of thinking about sculpture that would remove volume and have it, how much could I delineate quite literally through, how much could sculpture three-dimensionally be articulated through a line? And so I was thinking about scaffolding and flags and like the outline of chain link fences and in relationship to a kind of architectural space and borders and what was inside and outside, and also thinking about these temporary construction structures. That was the vocabulary for building, because it, and just thinking about like the kind of tenuousness of things possibly crashing and coming down. So what I did was I tried to think about material in reverse and we made our own steel rope, and instead of rope being suspended, we had the rope supporting this thin scaffolding that we made ourselves that's wrapped in lead, that's kind of tendril, organic-like, that's just on the verge of collapse. So kind of moving from this idea in the Blue Angels of things that we think is industrial becomes very delicate and fragile, and just...
And a 1,200-pound chunk of a building that's been taken from an actual site up in Northeast Philadelphia that is made to look very light.
Yeah. So with that, it's like I did this other project called House of Cards, where I wanted a scaffolding system to be supported by this idea of balance and counterbalance, where the scaffolding was held up by counterweights of paracord and rubble, and so this actual fragment of a building, I wanted to be the big giant piece of rubble that acted as the counterweight from this whole system from collapsing.
And I think with that in mind, just as you go in the show, you'll see that tension between kind of a playfulness and a scariness. I hope you can come back with us next week. We have a phenomenal program with the artist Anna Suhoy and Jackie Windsor, which is really a big coup to get Jackie here. Michelle studied with Jackie, as did Anna. We'll be talking about questions of gender and sculpture in the built environment. So thank you, Michelle. Trevor. Okay. So I'm still here. So I'm really pleased to introduce Trevor Shimizu. Trevor and I have been working together for the past few months on another exhibition, which is currently on view in Lisbon. So the show that you see here is actually an adjunct to an exhibition that's already been on view in Europe. So if you happen to be in Lisbon and you can go to the Kunsthal, it says Institute of Contemporary Art, University of Pennsylvania on the front door. And we have a survey of Trevor's kind of work in video as it also relates to painting. And Trevor and I really began a dialogue out of an exhibition that was here a couple of years ago, the Broadcasting EAI exhibition, Electronic Arts Intermix. And I became really interested in thinking not just about, because Trevor is primarily known, I think, to people as a painter, but thinking about how the video works help to complicate the subjectivity of his work as an artist, but also how it connects to a previous generation of video artists. So Trevor was working at Electronic Arts Intermix and was working closely with artists like Dan Graham, Shigeko Kubota, Carolee Schneemann, and just to start to think about how those earlier tactics might also inform a contemporary register. So I won't get too deeply into that because I want to just talk for a minute about what's going on here. Do you want to mention a little bit about how you were thinking about this extension of the show here with regard to the very early works that are in the show? And maybe we can talk about your self-portrait with Molly Ringwald.
Yeah, I think it's really appropriate that this show is at the university because many of the works here were actually made in my dorm or in my bedroom while in college. I never really thought that myself back then probably would never have wanted to show those pieces. And now that I have enough distance and I have no relation to that person, I feel like I can finally present it. Emily Watlington wrote in this great Art in America essay, she mentions how when I talk about the past, I sound like an old man. And I actually definitely feel that way when I look at my past works. I mean, there's work from 1996 when I was 18, my first oil painting painted on the dorm balcony in Santa Cruz. When I thought I was going to be like a very important romantic painter.
And we have it here on the left in relationship to a contemporary landscape.
So I was just completely embarrassed by that idea and decided to focus my attention on video and performance art the following year when I was 19. And just recently I started to become more interested in the material of painting again. And, revisiting Pierre Bonnard and the Impressionists that I, admired so much as a student.
And
it's helped me kind of come to terms with maybe my bad taste from the past or, yeah.
Well, when we were talking about the show, Trevor mentioned, it's kind of like pulling out a band that you liked in high school that now you're really very, embarrassed by. And that's something that kind of runs through a lot of your work where you're never quite sure if it's really you. Is it autobiographical? Is it sincere? Are we supposed to cringe? Are we supposed to laugh? Are we supposed to cry? And there's a kind of character that you're often kind of building but also participating in that is, I find, very interesting. Let me just go back here for a second. The self-portrait with Molly Ringwald, that's Trevor as Anthony Michael Hall in The Breakfast Club with Molly Ringwald eating sushi. So, there's also this interesting critique that's happening on the level of identity and affect in the internet. We have a series of videos upstairs, too, that are also older videos and newer videos that kind of bridge that space between maybe an older analog technique and the internet. I'm particularly interested in this video club where you were a nightlife photographer, and it's this moment where we're not quite on our smartphones, we don't have Facebook, and people haven't really figured out how to present themselves online yet. So, they would be photographed by Trevor with the hopes that maybe they would see themselves the next day. And we'll just talk about one kind of last thematic. So if some of the earlier works have been this kind of lonely loser that you've talked about, the kind of sad guy alone in his apartment, or this other kind of more emotional portrayal of maybe masculine subjectivity online, which stands in contrast to the aggressive bro-grammar or something like that. In more recent years, you've also switched to the kind of question of fatherhood. Do you want to say a few things about the Goldie's drawing and the unboxing, the toy unboxing?
Yeah, the Goldie's drawing is like a sort of preservation of this really fleeting moment of childhood when the child is drawing in a certain way that stylistically was very interesting to me. So I enlarged it, I copied her drawing and enlarged it to somewhat monumental scale to pay homage to her artistic output. But also this idea of sentimentality and kind of tenderness was always also as a student, very cringeworthy and it's something taboo in a way that I would never want to address. But now I guess I'm more willing to do that.
And the toys are literally different emotions. So if you're familiar with the genre of unboxing videos, he's literally unboxing his emotions, which is also kind of this other subtext. So also we have a fabulous program. In a couple weeks, Trevor's going to return and present some works from the EAI collection that were influential to you as an artist or with artists that you worked with, and it should be a really rewarding evening. So I hope we'll see you again. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, good evening. I'm Anthony Elms. This is Karyn Olivier. And this is an exhibition that I guess we've roundabout been cooking up, as you accurately remembered, 7 years. When we met through a mutual friend who said, well, you must, if you've moved to Philadelphia, you obviously hang out with Karyn, and I didn't realize she lived here, because I'm, I guess, a hermit, so, yeah. But it's been a great, fruitful conversation, and things have gone roundabout as sculptures have changed, and your ideas have been cooking around, and so thought it might be nice, because how we got to this exhibition is through thinking through recent work of yours that would never have been in this exhibition, which are monuments, public commissions, often temporary. Some of you may have seen this piece, which was up for a number of months, a couple falls ago, up in Germantown as part of Monument Lab. And so maybe just start with asking you about this turn to you thinking through monuments and memorials and what brought you to those. Yes, you got it.
I've been thinking about monuments, I'd say, for about 12 years. I was making what I called temporary monuments. And I think I was thinking about how monuments, they're there because we individually and collectively decided that something is important to be remembered, honored, celebrated. But often I think about the materiality always being stone. It could be an intimidating material that kind of, in a way, could distance you from it. But also the idea that material is too aligned with permanence, and monuments should be there to serve the purpose of being, I always think of them as, they should be a tool, they should be a catalyst, they should allow for a space of encounter for discourse. But if they are in that kind of solid material and in their towering position, and it's always about a verticality, in a way it doesn't allow you to do something with it. Or there's something about it being so permanent that it doesn't allow for a reinvestigation of history. History should always be written in pencil. So if the monument is so static, it's not allowing you to question. And I think these monuments should be there for us to kind of question our history, question our country's history. I got really into the talking statues in Rome, and there were these 8 statues throughout Rome in the 16th century, and they were sites for protest. People would put notes on them. And it was a site to kind of critique the government, it was a site to critique the Pope, but it also became an interesting thing because people would write notes on other statues to talk to each other. So all of a sudden these statues and these monuments became, they were shifting authors and shifting histories. So I've been constantly thinking about conflating histories, intersecting histories, and how to kind of tease that out, but also realize that there's the impossibility of that. Do I have to talk about this piece? You guys.
You don't have to talk about this piece.
I love it, but.
But you did jump ahead, and so we might also mention that you were in Rome for a year.
Oh, yeah.
And so this exhibition comes after her working on, several commissions, several monuments, and then you took a year off in Rome to think and make work, and then to return with 3 new works, and then to revisit 3 old works that hadn't necessarily been consciously made as monuments. And so we've reconstituted
it's not over till it's over. This is at Socrates Sculpture Park, and I'm thinking about, it was exciting that I really wanted to show this work, but I also know that when people think about monuments and memorials, there's a certain thing they think they're going to see. But when I was thinking about the works in the show, when I think about monuments, I think about presentness, because in a way you're present, in the present moment, you're thinking about past and history. I think about absence, of course there's loss. I think about monuments are also on some level about displacement, because it's a displaced time, like you're honoring something that happened at another time. You're honoring a person who's not necessarily right there. So I think it's a funny thing about displacement, and I think about all the works in the show don't belong inside. I was also thinking about monuments, about how if they function, they should kind of, and they don't all have to do this, but what would it mean to kind of reveal beauty and the horror and the joy and all those things of what it is to be human? Like, can they be humble and grand? And yes, grand doesn't necessarily mean always large. It could be grand in other ways.
Like it could move from Rome to hear.
Yeah. That was a pain. I've been trying to get this here since the end of July, and it just arrived literally like a couple weeks ago. Italians are slow. Too many holidays. Literally, that's what kept happening.
Yes. So it was shipped. This is a piece that was shipped, and it's maybe the clearest work that you'll see in the gallery that reflects on times in Rome and a sort of monument that might be common to Rome nowadays, or now centuries. And that is now brought here, and you'll see it's a chance to also see what will be Karyn's first video. It's a sculpture with a video work as well, and a narrative. And then there is also a sound work. So I feel like people keep asking me, where are the 6 sculptures? And I say, just because you said something's a large sculpture doesn't mean it sits in front of you.
And this.
Maybe that's something you could address.
Like this to me
before we get
is-
to that for a second,
Oh.
just
Size.
scale, like human scale, monumentality.
I mean, I can go back to the Battle of Germantown Memorial. Oh, or this.
I'm just changing sides.
There is something, the Vernon Park is a park I go to all the time. It's 5 blocks from my house. And I realized I kind of never paid attention to it. I mean, every year there's a reenactment. But in a way, I was thinking, what would it mean for me to make a different kind of reenactment? So by mirroring that monument, it kind of did what I wanted to. In a way, the monument can never sit still, where it's always kind of, there's an irresolution, or it's irreconcilable. I mean, so I was thinking also, maybe at the same time that it's a mirror, it's reflecting the landscape. So now this monument is encompassing us. We're seeing ourselves, so we become the monument. It was reflecting that it's, now you're seeing black people when the neighborhood used to be German. And so I mean, and then it kind of, this was another piece where I constantly thinking about the past and different histories, how they're connected. That piece only happened because I found out the history of the Francis Daniel Pistorius monument. And that monument was dedicated to a German settler who was fighting against against slavery in the 1600s. So far ahead of his time. And I was thinking about what did it mean that because he was a German during World War I and II, they boxed that monument over. So my piece only happened because I read about a German, a foreigner, where kind of this racism and xenophobia happened. So I thought, what would it mean now for me to box it over in that way? So now I'm putting another time period on top of another, but now it's in present time. So it's going to be consistently reflecting the moment, be it the landscape or the people. So how do I make these things, if it doesn't sit still in a way, then we own it. We can claim it now. Because that's the kind of point of them.
Yeah, and so I had this slide up because this is a public work that people can see. That is actually permanent here in the city of Philadelphia. And to that, wanted to use it as a way to plug the gallery notes, have a text that you can just breeze past, just ignore the text, and go straight to the fold-out poster, which is, it's not a map that you can necessarily use to see Karyn's works that are out in public, except for this one. But we did want to allude, as she said, none of the things that are in the gallery belong in the gallery. They all do come from elsewhere, and they all have they're either meant to be outside or the kind of construction that you should do outside or should leave outside. And so we wanted to allude to the sites that have been important in recent years for Karyn, that are out amongst us and that we might pass without thinking about them any particular day. And that can be a moment to maybe talk about the carnations and
Yeah, I
why
think
we're all sitting with
this to me is like the
carnations.
biggest piece and potentially the linchpin, the most important one. And I mean, I'm not from Philadelphia, but it feels like home at this point. I mean, I've been here since 2011, and I'm not from West Philly, so I don't know. I didn't experience move, but I've spent a lot of time in the last 6 months since I've been back from Rome, and I just gotten to know people and talking to people, and I knew I wanted to do something. We're too close for me not to do something to address move. I'm gonna
Can I
be
talk-
really, oh, sorry.
Do people know what move is?
Oh,
Just make sure. A lot of nodding. Okay, so if you don't, there's a wall text
Yeah,
that you
those-
can get into, but
so I felt as though that I didn't want a piece that would only encompass the suffering and the horror. I wanted to kind of take a moment the day before when people did get the eviction notice, but there was still a day of celebration. It was Mother's Day. And a lot of black churches, my church, you get a carnation, a red carnation if your mother's alive, and a white one if she's passed. But I think even if you don't have that tradition, everyone has some sort of connection to this. And I kept thinking that everyone has a memory of this, and what does it mean that we put this on And we're in the gallery space. We are a community for that moment. And then as you go off, it's going to kind of disperse and kind of occupy the spaces. So in a way, this is actually literal, but it's also symbolic, but it also has meaning in terms of what now we can say, who are we together in this moment, no matter how brief. Hokey, I know, but
I'm okay with hokey.
I'm down with the hokey. We have to go.
Yeah, we do have to go. We want to, people have time with the show, have time for a drink, have time for celebration, but do also want to mention there will be a program late in March. Harmony, oh my gosh, I've just blanked out a name because I'm nervous. Harmony Holiday, a fantastic poet, sort of thinker who's done a lot of things of thinking through spaces and thinking through ghosts of spaces and how to navigate them through sound, through movement, through words will come. And Move has also been important to their work as a poet, and so it's going to come and sort of do a new piece for us and think through publicly in the space what it could mean through other definitions and other ways of forming a group together. And so with that, let's just all be together somewhere else where I'm not on stage and say hi.